Mesdames et messieurs, the greatest festival of our contemporary society, the Olympic Games, is about to begin. This is going to be close.
Oh! They're all completely gassed! They've given it everything on the global bucket! Oh, yeah! Go! Oh!
Brilliant! But that is an Olympic championship.
Ready?
Hello and welcome to another episode of Keep the Flame Alive, the podcast for fans of the Olympics and Paralympics. If you love the games, we are the show for you. I am your host, Jill Jaracz, joined as always by my lovely co-host, Alison Brown. Alison, hello, how are you?
Who are you wearing today? Did you watch the Met Gala at all?
No, I was working an election. I have democracy as a core value here.
We had a Shukflastani at the Met Gala.
Oh.
Miles Chomley-Watson, one of our fencers, walked the Met Gala carpet and looked very snazzy.
Oh, good. I hope there are links.
I'm sure there are.
I have a couple things at the top of the show that stumbled upon something. Producer Ben wanted to watch some Paris 2024 coverage, and we pulled up Peacock and discovered that it is no longer on Peacock. Not surprised. But if you search Olympics on Peacock, you will find a playlist of old Dick Cavett episodes featuring Olympians. Yeah.
Okay, so this would be 60s and 70s Olympians?
70s, pretty much, yeah. And Dick Cavett was a talk show host. He was pretty erudite and cerebral is probably the best way to put him. And he was popular back in the day. We started watching. There's only 5 episodes in this series. So there's Joe Frazier, which there's not a whole lot of Joe Frazier, but there's enough else to make you go, whoa, 70s.
But just, you know what? I don't know how much of Joe Frazier interviews exist. So that's kind of a nice little nugget.
Yeah. Then we get to Kurt Thomas from 1979.
Oh, so after 76, but before the 80 boycott.
Yes.
Oh.
And there's all this stuff that they kind of talk a little bit about in the run-up to 1980 that is going on to promote the Olympics. And Dick Cavett did high school gymnastics. So it's not just an interview. It's Kurt and Dick with a pommel horse and parallel bars doing them.
Do they both do Thomas Flares? Well, Thomas certainly does Thomas Flares.
Right. Dick tries. But it's very impressive what he can do for like a 42-year-old man.
Who probably hasn't done it for 20 years at least.
And then the next one we saw was Muhammad Ali. And apparently Muhammad Ali and Dick Cavett are buddies.
Makes sense.
And this show takes place on a steamboat in the Mississippi River outside of New Orleans. Where
also makes sense.
There apparently was a PBS executive meeting going on. So the show is live in front of, it must have been the night's entertainment for the executives at their conference, because that's what a lot of is going on. So it's very interesting is all I can say. It's an interesting show. The next one on the list, which we have not gotten to, is Jim McKay talking about Munich. And then I believe it's more gymnasts are after that. So that is something if you have Peacock, look for it. You just kind of get sucked in to the slowness of what a talk show was, and some really interesting insights.
I mean, Jim McKay.
Right.
You know how I feel about Jim McKay.
I have other feelings.
I'm sorry.
What are you apologizing for?
Because I think I threw you under the bus a little bit.
A little bit? Oh my gosh. So if you've been following our little beef with Ben Waterworth and Off the Podium for not talking to us about Roy and HG on Instagram, Ben was
Ben had a response.
I'm sorry. The prima donna, Ben Waterworth, had a response to, why didn't we have him on the show? And if we had listened, we of course would to Off the Podium has the audacity to tell us how to run our show and say, you should have put me on. And I would have told you, well, if we put you on at the beginning of our Sydney series, there's always the fear that you're going to rag on it and tank our whole series. So Ben, maybe we'll have you on at the end. Maybe if we think it's worth having an Australian's opinion about Sydney 2000 once we get to the end of it. Then my so-called partner in this adventure immediately, in response to Ben Waterworth on Insta for the world to see, says, "Wait 1 second, that was all Jill Jaracz. I am totally innocent."
I was. You are the
but
one
you
who...
don't throw me under the bus. I'm not happy about this.
I'm so sorry. No, but you got... I was a little concerned that maybe you got a little overly emotional about Ben's lack of sharing. I'm sorry. Don't be mad at me, Jill.
Well, listeners, giving you a heads up, if we are still around in the middle of the summer, or if Alison is still around in the middle of the summer, we are going to celebrate the milestone of producing 400 regular episodes. And I had originally thought it would be nice to have a little party.
Don't divorce me. We can go to therapy.
But yeah, episode 400 for us will drop on July 17th. So sometime ahead of July 17th, of the head of that episode, we are going to open up the phone lines to have a chat with you about anything related to the Olympics and Paralympics, and we will have more details in the future. Keep an eye on our Facebook group, Keep the Flame Alive podcast, but do mark your calendars because we do want to celebrate 400 with you on the show. Today, we are talking with Dr. Yoav Dubinsky, who is a professor of sports business and the operational director of the brand new Olympic Studies Hub at the University of Oregon. Originally from Tel Aviv, Israel, Dr. Dubinsky has a background in sports journalism and sports research. His education includes a master's in Olympic studies, Olympic education, and organization of Olympic events from the University of Peloponnese, as well as a PhD in sport management from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. Since 2018, he's been with the University of Oregon's Lundquist College of Business, and earlier in 25 launched the university's new Olympic Studies Hub, which is going to be celebrating Olympic Studies Week, May 12th through 18th. This will include events for the general public. So after the interview, we will share with you what you can get in on there because it looks like a fun week. Our interview with Yoav, we'll talk about what he does with the Olympic Studies Hub, and we also get an Israeli's perspective on the Olympics. Take a listen. You were born and raised in Tel Aviv.
Indeed.
What is the Olympics like over there to experience, or how do people receive the Olympics?
So like everything in Israel, it's a complex experience. For me, the first childhood recognition of the Olympics is just being fascinated by the opening ceremony of the Seoul 1988 Olympics and the martial arts exhibition. But if I'm really going into to having a more cognizant view of the Olympics and as a sports fan, then it's 1992. It was the dream team that finally I can see, as living in Tel Aviv in the more European time zone, I can see my basketball idols playing in prime time and not just a few highlights. And Yael Arad, the chairperson of the Israeli Olympic Committee, and now also an IOC member, she won Israel's first Olympic medal in judo, silver medal. And right after her, Oren Smadja, who is now the national coach, men's coach in judo, won a bronze medal right afterwards. So this is where Israel's success in terms of if we can call success to medals, but yes, Israel's competitiveness started to manifest in medals in the Olympics. Yael Arad also dedicated that medal, the first Israeli medal, to the Munich victims, to the 11 Israeli athletes, coaches, and referees that were murdered in the terror attack in Munich 1972. And the heritage of the Munich massacre in 72 is very much part of Israel's national identity and the collective identity of every delegation moving forward. So with that, we have that balance, or at least I have that view, and that manifests through Israel's participation in the Olympic Games, seeing it as a global celebration, and the best athletes in the world compete. Israel is going there to compete and has, with the exception of London 2012, has won medals in each summer games since Barcelona, and also very tied into the history and the past, the recognition that the Arab-Israel-Palestinian dispute is manifested through the Olympic movement, part of the identity of the athletes in terms of heritage and continuing the legacy of Munich 1972, and also dealing with current implications of the conflict. In some games, it's more noticeable. In some games, it's less. Obviously, with the war going on, it had security impacts in Paris. But it depends. If we're looking at 50 years plus period since 72, it has different meanings and manifestations.
I have a question about country shopping because Israel is one of those countries where a lot of athletes who did not grow up in Israel compete for Israel. And how is that seen in Israel?
So it's not so much the case in the Summer Olympics. It's more of the case in the Winter Olympics, naturalization. There are several laws in Israel, the return law and the citizenship law, which are laws that grant Jewish people Israeli citizenship. And as a result, Jewish people from the diaspora, Jewish athletes from the diaspora, have received Israeli citizenship and went on to represent Israel in international sports. You find a few in the Summer Olympics, but it's mostly noticeable in the Winter Olympics, where Israel is not a winter country. Israel has mixed feelings towards that. On one hand, Israel sees that as Israel shows participation in the Olympics, the Israeli flag is raised, and also a mix of cultures of both diaspora Jews from ex-Soviet Union countries coming together with Jews of North America and some finding some fusion with that. But also because there aren't a lot of training facilities in Israel, and much of the center happens, or much of the, especially in figure skating, much of the training happens in New Jersey, which raises some questions about connectivity between some of the athletes and the state of Israel, especially after games are over. Some have strong ties and connections to Israel, which is and they are very much appreciated. And some just have seen it over the years as a way of, well, we can make Team USA or we can make the team somewhere else. You go, they manage to reach the Olympics, have their Olympic moment, and move on with their lives unrelated to Israel. So I would say it really depends on an individual case, but the Shvut law and Chok HaShvut and Chok HaEzrachut, the return law and the citizenship law, are meant to promote Aliyah, meaning immigration of Jewish people to Israel and establish their lives in Israel. And some athletes have been doing that through representation of Israel and then staying later on. The Maccabiah Games play a role in that. So just because someone was born somewhere else and then moved to Israel and represent Israel, that's not necessarily seen negative. It's seen negatively when there aren't authentic connections or manifestation of connections to Israel, and then that's scrutinized. In Tokyo, Israel had a baseball team that qualified to the Tokyo Olympics, and most of them were American Jews or North American Jews, with some having strong ties to Israel, but some did not. And there were some critiques about that, or thoughts, do they really represent what being an Israeli athlete means?
What made you want to study Olympism?
So it's not necessarily Olympism that I'm studying. I'm in the realm of Olympic studies, or studying the Olympic movement. I was a journalist in Israel, and in 2008, I was sent to cover the Beijing Olympics in China. And for me, this was very much of a life-changing experience because I fulfilled a childhood dream of covering a major sport event. So that's just a check. That is something that they managed to achieve finally. And it was the biggest sport event that I've attended. Because prior to that, with the exception of a few football games in Europe, soccer games in Europe, most of the sport events that I've attended were in Israel. And beyond the security and political issues, Israel is just a small country with relatively very modest facilities. So going to China and seeing the Olympics for the first time, and seeing the Beijing Olympics as my first impression of the Olympics, the Beijing 2008 Olympics, which were bigger than any previous Olympics, left a very profound impression on me on how a country is using the Olympic Games to change its image or to leave a much more complex impression. Because before that, most of what I read were air pollution, human rights violation, and so forth. So it was also my first and so far, unfortunately, so far, my only visit to China. And my coverage showed a much more complex view of what China was or is, also enjoying the history and the culture and everything that the Pearl Market and the Temple of Heaven and the Wall. And when coming back, I started to reflect, well, did they get to me? Meaning, did the organization change the way that I covered the games? And that got me into thinking into how do countries and cities are using sports in a way to shape their image. Not long after that, I received a scholarship to do the first master program in Olympic Studies and Sports Management by the IOA, the International Olympic Academy in Olympia, Greece, along with the University of Peloponnese. So that got me a lot deeper into the study of the Olympics, understanding what Olympism is, understanding what Olympic studies is, understanding what Olympic education is. Later on, doing a PhD at the University of Tennessee, where I looked at how Israel uses sports for nation branding and public diplomacy, and now teaching at the University of Oregon, where in Eugene, a city that officially is branding itself as Tracktown, USA, because of the connection to track and field, hosting Olympic trials, hosting national championships, the World Championships of Athletics in 2022. And so far since Beijing, I either covered or researched the last 5 Olympic Games, either as a journalist or researcher from Beijing, London, Rio de Janeiro, Tokyo, and Paris.
How successful do you think the various cities you have studied have been in changing their image or changing the way the world sees them because of the Olympics?
I think success is measured differently, and success is definitely a challenge to quantify, also from a qualitative perspective, because the goals of China in 2008 was basically coming out, opening to the world, showing this is what we can do functionally, technologically wise, infrastructure wise, and so forth. London, 4 years later, London was already a global city. They didn't need the Olympics to be a global city. They looked more of renovating Stratford area, green, sustainability. So these are different goals. Rio de Janeiro, I would say, did not necessarily meet the goals of or objectives of positioning itself as the central regional capital of South America or whatnot. There were all kinds of social, political, economic problems. Tokyo, there was COVID. They managed to get through COVID and to have the Olympics. The Olympics did not stop. But being in Tokyo and coming back from Tokyo, I was very much reflective of should these Olympics have even taken place without fans, with so many restrictions. For me, the every day was, full of anxiety about all the COVID tests, and it's not. I wasn't too worried about getting sick. I was vaccinated a million times, but I was more about contact tracing and being isolated in a country where I don't speak the language or even read the language and so forth. So I can just imagine what athletes were going through. So I'm not sure that Tokyo really met the goals of the organizers in terms of recovery game from the 2011 tsunami and earthquake and Fukushima nuclear disaster. I don't think that these games met the goals. Paris, again, it depends on how you define success, but I would say that these games were games that the Olympic movement very much needed. Games that were celebratory for most, despite all the geopolitical turmoil going on pretty smoothly, obviously beautifully visualized on television. In Paris, the opening ceremony was definitely an experience with the showers at the Trocadero. But when I came back to the US and watched it, on NBC or Peacock or wherever I streamed it, it looked beautiful. So on TV it looked beautiful, but also the games themselves, they were well executed on a macro level.
You mentioned this Paris being the games that the Olympics needed. That kind of moment has happened many times throughout Olympic history. What is it that can help shift directions, if that makes sense? Is it a good organizing committee or good planning, or the choice of the city turned out to be really good?
I think they all come together. Paris is relatively a safe choice for the IOC, a global city, a city that has facilities, that is hosting regularly. Although there were a lot of concerns about how the local community will receive the games, because there are also a lot of protest and active citizenship in France. But the French people that we saw on the metro every day were the heroes of the games. They created a fantastic atmosphere. So it very much depends on that. The organizing committee made the games accessible mostly in terms of close to metro stations. When I just arrived, I had some concerns because the city was basically blocked leading to the opening ceremony. I would not recommend other cities doing a CN opening ceremony, despite how it looked on TV. I don't think that this should be the lesson here, but I think that they made the games, they connected it to the community, and the community responded. And I think that this made the game special. I also think that the IOC, after Rio not going exactly the way they wanted, and of course the two COVID games in Tokyo and Beijing, the IOC needed something that resembled the Olympics without major disruptions, and I think Paris delivered that. So maybe you also need a low point to see some sort of a turning point as well.
Okay, calling the French active citizens, I think, is the best euphemism I have ever heard.
Well, yeah, I mean, there were concerns about protests on a variety of issues. Obviously, the social political turmoil all across Europe, all across the world. So there were definitely concerns there. The level of security was very high, so that also sparks oftentimes backlash. But overall, looking at the games as macro, Parisians and French people very much embrace the games. There were some concerns that people in Paris will move away from Paris to the Cannes homes and so forth, and that tourists will not come because of central touristic places being blocked or restricted movement. But from what I've seen, that was not the case, or at least the venues were full and the city was full during the games.
When you go to a city to do research, an Olympic city,
Yeah.
do you have different things you're looking at, or are you kind of looking at the same elements every time and building a data set?
So it very much depends what type of research am I doing. What is my research design? It usually starts with the MPC, with understanding what's going on, and then or I should say that's on the ground. It starts with the research questions and what do I want to answer or address. For Paris, it's more about writing a book about a new era of the Olympic movement. That I already signed the contracts. I need to submit the first draft by the end of 2025, and with that in mind, there are some events that I'm scheduling in advance, and then what's going on during the games. What are the main storylines? What are the main touch points? Who do I need to talk to? Which events? Which competition events and non-competition events do I need to attend? And then following up on that. But in other games, it was different research design. In Rio, the research design was about the Israeli delegation. So I joined the Israeli delegation in a lot of their activities in the preparation in Israel and commemoration in Israel of the Munich victims, visiting for the first time, stones from Olympia were put in the Olympic Village to commemorate athletes who were killed during the games or died during the games, not just the Munich victims, also other athletes. So I visited that. And held interviews and during the game. So it very much depends on the research design, the research question that I'm following.
You studied and taught at the International Olympic Academy. Talk to us
Yeah.
about what that institution does and why it's important. Like what you've learned there that has impacted the work that you do.
Sure. So the IOA, the International Olympic Academy, they sit in Olympia, Greece. I did my first my bachelor in political science at the University of Tel Aviv, my first master in political communication at the University of Tel Aviv. And then in 2009, received a scholarship to do a master degree in Olympia, Greece, which is a master. The university behind it is the University of Peloponnese that sits in Sparta. It was a fully funded master degree. Now it's not fully funded. They have it annually, but now it was a donation from I don't know, some Greek billionaire. I don't remember the name, but the program took place in Olympia, 2 terms in person, and the third term of writing a thesis from your home country, an international program. And they bring international scholars to teach different angles on the Olympic movement, history, communication, philosophy, ethics, marketing, business, political science, both Greek lectures and international lectures. And it just exposes you to the power of sports to be a common ground between people, between myself and other students and other faculty, and also, of course, to learn about the different angles and facets and the complexity of the Olympic movement. And since then, I've been a coordinator in their annual sessions between 2010 and 2013. In the last few years since I joined the University of Oregon, I've been a lecturer in some of the summers. I'm coming back this summer to lecture in one of the sessions. So it's a very special place in terms of giving a deep understanding of the Olympic movement. And for us who have both a critical view of the Olympic movement, but also believe in the power of sports to be a common denominator between people and find a common ground between people that bridges political views and nationalities and races and genders and a lot of gaps. It's a fascinating place to be part of and engaged with. And now here at the University of Oregon, I've been founding and now the operational director of our new Olympic Studies Center, the University of Oregon Olympic Studies Hub that we just launched, that was officially recognized by the IOC Olympic Studies Center in late 2024.
What is that process like to get officially recognized? Because there's not many study hubs. You're the only one in the
In the
US,
US,
correct?
yes.
Yeah.
Well, the process is quite a process. Well, it was quite a process. It took basically the whole idea started in the spring of 2022 as we were coming out of the pandemic. And I'll talk about how that developed. But in terms of the process, it was speaking with the IOC Olympic Study Center. They sit in Lausanne, in the premises of the Olympic Museum in Lausanne. Understanding what this thing is as an Olympic Studies and Research Center, what were some of the mistakes that were happening in the US in the past that led to study centers not keeping their recognition. We are not the first. We are the only one, but there were in the past Olympic study centers who did not. And then working with the United States Olympic Committee to receive their letter of support to indeed make sure that we have working with both the IOC, the IOCOSC, the IOC Olympic Studies Center, and the USOPC to show that we indeed create enough academic content that meets the requirements to be recognized as an Olympic Studies and Research Center, an OSRC. We call ourselves the University of Oregon Olympic Studies Hub, and I'll explain that. And then just filling the forms and waiting for all the recognitions for everyone to approve and for the letters to be sent. And that took quite time as, again, there were no American Olympic Study Centers before we applied, or I should say there were currently no American Study Centers, Olympic Study Centers before we applied. So it took the USOPC also some time to refine their guidelines before they sent the IOC their approval letter and they approved us. And this all took 2.5 years. It shouldn't take so long. It will take probably much. Now that we've went through this, I believe that the protocols are clearer and it will probably take less time for others if they want to go through this process.
The IOC is turning the Titanic. Everything with them is it's a long time, right?
I mean, there was Paris in the middle, so both the IOC and the IOC Olympic Study Center and the USOPC had and us as an academic institution had Paris as a priority. But it took time. I'm not sure where it was, the IOC Olympic Studies Center, or I'm not sure exactly where it was in the United States Olympic Committee, Olympic and Paralympic Committee. But we got there.
What kind of requirements do you need to maintain? Or, like how did other study centers go by the wayside?
So I'll speak about ourselves, and then I'll explain what went wrong with from what I know with others. We have 2 points of differentiation of what we do. First of all, we sit in a business school as an Olympic Studies Hub. And as such, our business school has a very hands on approach of connection to the industry. And a lot of what we do as part of our curriculums and our extracurriculum activities in the realm of sports business is connection with different players in the sports business ecosystem, from sponsors to broadcasters to governing bodies, Olympic committees, sites visits, both in the US and abroad. And a lot of that happened with stakeholders of the Olympics. In 2019, I joined a site visit with students to Denver and Colorado Springs. I'm leading a study abroad course where we go to London and we tour the Olympic Park and learn on sustainability. Prior to the pandemic, other faculty-led study abroad programs to Amsterdam and Berlin and Munich, and MBA trips to East Asia, to past host cities in Asia. So we have a strong connection, hands-on connection to the industry when it comes to that. Obviously, to sponsors in the US. Obviously, the University of Oregon is very connected to Nike and to the Knight family, as this is where basically Nike was formed, and Nike is a partner of Team USA. So a lot of hands-on connections to the industry that we incorporate during our classes and our work. We offer a course, SBS 255, Business of the Olympic Games. I've been teaching in the last few years. Prior to that, other faculty developed a course and taught it. So we have a course on the Olympics within our curriculum officially. So that's from the business side. And we do research and present in related conferences. So that's the differentiation on the business school. And then we have a university that has over 100 years of history in the Olympic movement. Over 100 athletes from the university have competed in the Olympic Games, host Olympic trials, have all kinds of Olympic players in the Olympic business ecosystem coming to campus, whether it's NBC that broadcasts competition from Haywood Field, World Athletics, US National Championships, and Olympic trials, and so forth. And in all of these events, our students are engaged, not just in our business students, but students from the School of Journalism or from other departments who do research on the performance side of the Olympics. So we have all these touch points of engagement with the Olympic ecosystem. And when we galvanize all of that together, and that's why we call ourselves a hub, because we galvanize what's happening. We aim to galvanize what's happening across the university. Then we create enough content on the Olympic movement to reach that recognition. What happened with other universities, and I don't want to be specific here, is that there was someone who was very passionate about the Olympic movement and championed the idea of an Olympic Study Center, got the recognition because of the great work that person was doing. And then that person at some point either left the university or found other interests. And as a result, this initiative kind of faded away because there were no people to continue. And one of our main goals as we were just starting as an Olympic Studies and Research Center is to make sure that it's not related to just one person, just a few people who are passionate, but that we authentically connected to the fabric of this university that again has 100 years of history in the Olympics and hosts Olympic trials and authentically does all these scholarly related activities where we engage with the Olympic movement.
So if I'm a student or prospective student and I want to get involved, is it taking classes? Do you need to be in the business school? How does that work? Do you get a minor, or are there major programs, or what kind of results come from this?
On some level, we're still figuring some of these things out. We're not offering a degree in Olympic studies. There are some Olympic Study Center who do offer degrees in Olympic studies, including joint degrees. We are not there yet, and I'm not sure that this is where we should go. We want to create more touch points of involvement of what we are already doing, meaning enhance the relationships with the different stakeholders, that relationships that we still have to create more opportunities for our students and faculty. We are now also in the last few years, the University of Oregon has been part of the Global Sports GSON, the Global Sports Network, the Global Sports University Network, with universities across the world, where we engage with them. For our students, we mostly want to create more opportunities with our existing stakeholders and build more touch points with new stakeholders to have them engage with basically four pillars that we define to ourselves. Experiential learning, which is the integration between scholarly work, the classes, and real life. I mean the industry. Business and Olympism, which relates to engagement with the community and overall how sports can do good to society, and then understanding some aspects of sports and climate change and sports and gender equality and social issues related to sports. Scholarship and studies and research, which is basically scholarly work every university does in terms of research and publications and classes, and multidisciplinary collaborations, meaning that this is not just an initiative of the business school, but ongoing collaborations through the university, through our networks of Olympic study centers, the GSU network, the Global Sports University Network, different stakeholders within Eugene and Oregon, and different stakeholders within the Olympic movement, whether it's sponsors, broadcasters, national governing bodies, Olympic national committees, and so forth, national Olympic committees, and so forth.
Obviously, with LA 2028 and Salt Lake City 2034 coming not that far away, what do you hope that students and faculty will be able to do to connect with those games and create some kind of experience that is beneficial? It's not a fun word, but something different.
Yeah, that's a very good question, because LA 28 was very much in mind when this ball started rolling. As I said, I started to think about this in the spring of 2022 as we were coming out of the pandemic and starting to live again in a more meaningful capacity than just in being in a closed door or teaching through Zoom. An event started to happen on campus. We offered SBS 255 Business of the Olympic Games for the first, or I taught it for the first time. Then we taught it a year before. Different faculty taught it online previous year. And our university was preparing to host the Oregon 22 World Athletics Championship. So I saw how our students were getting involved, creating seminars, and then during the competition themselves, I saw students from different parts of the university being involved with the organization or with journalism tasks and collaborations and so forth. So when we went to that through this journey of of an Olympic Study Center, we said, okay, we have all these activities happening at our school, and this might be the right climate to go through this, because there is a pathway towards the US hosting all kinds of mega events with the crown jewel LA 28. Now, we also, or at least I also, assumed based on how the bid was going that that Salt Lake City will win either 2030 or 2034. So I thought, okay, there's a pathway beyond LA 28 that we can look years ahead and say, okay, we have all these touch points to build towards these mega events. Our MBA program visits LA almost annually, meets with LA 28 as well, in terms of learning more, having this hands-on experiential learning experiences of understanding how the preparations for the games. As the games will come closer, we hope to have more students engaged in terms of activities with different stakeholders, from sponsors to broadcasters to the organization itself. I can't speak about specifics as it's too early for us to. We're not there yet, but we hope that these relations that we're building and being a recognized Olympic Study Center will open more opportunities for us, for our community, and our students to be engaged. But I should say, LA 28, that's the crown jewel. That's something that we are definitely looking at. But there's also the FIFA World Cup and all kinds of rugby championships, other international championships happening in the US. We will host in 2026 the Under 20 World Athletics. US Soccer also bidding for the Women's World Cup in the early 2030s, which I would not be surprised if they'll win. So we look at LA 28. We're glad that Salt Lake City was awarded 2034, as this gives us a more long-term view of how we can continue in engagement. But also there are some landmarks along the way.
Why are your students telling you that they're interested in studying the Olympics and why it's important to them versus maybe what we thought of it 20, 30 years ago?
I think our students are interested in engagement in sports and in sports business. There is a lot of passion here in Oregon. I also think that the students in Oregon have a very diverse and somewhat international perspective or global perspective on sports that they want to be part of and intrigued about. Having a university that is where track and field is strongly rooted in its culture, that also goes into using public spaces for physical activities, nature, and running and jogging. I think that enhances the connection to the Olympic movement as well. But I should say we're not all about the Olympic movement. American football is still the most popular sports here. Basketball is full. Basketball is an Olympic sport, of course. But basketball, both men and women, since Sabrina UNESCO is getting a lot of hype. Women's volleyball is also very, very popular in the last few years. Oregon itself is very passionate for soccer, Portland Thorns. I always tell my students that as someone who's grew up on European football, well, I won't talk bad here about American men's football, but go watch a Portland Thorns game. That's special. That's a great atmosphere. Going to watch some of the best football players in the women's game in the world. So and a very passionate fan base. So there is a lot of authentic passion here, I would say. Being in the Pacific Northwest, there's also being remote. It has different sides. One of them, though, is that trial and error, that you can think outside the box, you can try things. And, the Nike was created from a coach who used a waffle iron to shape track shoes, and things spiraled from there. So, or not just this is a bit simplistic, but that's part of the roots of Nike. So, innovation and thinking outside the box is also something that our students are keen to.
So there's an advantage to being not in Lausanne and not, kind of in that heart.
I mean, yes, it's a flip side. Obviously, it's not as central as New York or LA. You don't have as many professional sports teams, or Atlanta, where you don't have professional sports teams. Where we're looking at LA or Atlanta, who hosted Olympic Games in the past, or other mega events. It's raining a lot, but yes, everything has its pros and cons. And if we can understand our opportunities, we can benefit from that. So there are some aspects of being remote to try new things.
Even though the school will cover all sorts of major sporting events, the Olympics stands out. Obviously, it's mega event, the biggest sporting event with lots and lots of sports, and that sets it apart. But what else sets the Olympics apart from other sporting events like the World Cup?
I pose such a question to my students a lot, to see how they react to that. I'll say that in my opinion, I see the Olympic Games as a story about humanity, a story about how we as people, as humans, how we treat each other and our planet. And every Olympic Games is a different chapter about in this story that we all can find touch points to relate to. It's just being told through sports, through who jumps faster, or who jumps higher, or runs faster, or swims faster, or dunks a basketball better, or shoots a basketball, or does a nippon better on his or her opponent. Um, it's beyond the broadcasting component, there are more countries participating, more delegations representing more countries and regions participating in the Olympic Games than state recognized by the United Nations. Um, it's different genders and different in different sports, and there's a whole cultural festivity around it that just one sport, regardless of its popularity, cannot meet. And also, it is every 4 years. It's these are your 10 seconds. Lights go on. You succeed. You get eternal glory. You blink. Wait 4 years, and then good luck. Who knows what's going to happen with us 4 years from now? So there's this beautiful cruelty in it that is also part of the human story. So that's how I see it, and that's why I think the Olympics are so unique. It's not a story of the happy ending or necessarily good morals, but that's part of the human story, and that's how I see it.
If you could go back in time,
Yeah.
what Olympics would you like to go to?
Oh, I told you, as a kid, I was impacted by Barcelona. I can give you a more profound answer, maybe Berlin 36 or something like that. No, I would like to go to Barcelona. I would like to watch the dream team. I would like to enjoy Barcelona. But each games have their own specialty.
If you could be an Olympian in any sport, you don't have to be good in it. What would you do?
I love basketball. It's just that Maccabi Tel Aviv is my hometown, my hometown club, and they played a role in how I was shaped watching sports. So if I could play basketball, that would be nice. I'm just not that good or talented or dedicated or eat right or sleep right or basically bad coaching when I grew up. That's the reason why I did not represent. Yeah.
I'm curious as to this is a little off topic, but I want to ask this. In the Tokyo opening ceremony, they did the moment of silence for the
Yeah.
1972 massacre victims. And when Jill and I spoke about it, we both said our jaws were on the floor that they had done that. And I'm curious as to both your reaction personally and then kind of professionally what the IOC was doing with that.
My reaction was being grumpy in my hotel room as I was quarantined in the first 3 days, already after I booked my flight. After I already booked my flight, they changed some of the COVID regulations, and I think it was 3 days of mandatory quarantine since on arrival, and I booked my flight to arrive 2 days, and only after that I saw that was 3 days. So I was mostly grumpy. But more seriously, I think that this was a profound moment for the Olympic movement. To a certain degree, if you can call anything a closure in terms of family trauma, this was a moment where the families got the formal recognition that they wanted. They felt closure to some extent in Rio with the commemoration in the Olympic Village, but that was a moment where that was very profound for the Israeli delegation and for the families. This did not continue in Paris, and there were reports in Israel that the families themselves said, in this political climate, maybe will tone down in terms of in terms of the opening ceremony, and there was just a ceremony that the Israelis held, and Bach arrived. Overall, Thomas Bach has been very accommodating and in very good relations with the families of the victims. And that goes back to Thomas Bach being the head of the German Olympic Committee and promoting, I believe it was the Munich 2018 bid or the bid for Munich 2018. I believe it was that. Maybe I'm missing the exact bid, and through that, when he was engaged with the families, they asked him, "What will you do about the Munich victims?" When he was promoting a Munich winter bid, and he said, "We will recognize them. We'll show the respect." And since then, the families were very supportive of Thomas Bach, and Thomas Bach and the families were working very alongside each other, which was not the case with Jacques Rogge. So I believe both the commemoration in the Olympic Village in Rio and the moment of silence in Tokyo were very profound moments that could give some peace to the families of the victims. Although again, it's a very complex issue, especially with the war going on and the contested place of Israel internationally on every level.
So, Yoav, thank you so much
Thank
for
you so much.
spending
This was
time.
fun.
This was a lot of
Thank
fun, and it's really we're excited to have some Olympic study stuff in the U.S. So, much success to you, and we'll keep in touch.
Thanks a lot. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Yoav. You can follow Yoav on LinkedIn. Also, learn more about the University of Oregon's Olympic Studies Hub webpage. At it's located through their business college, so business.uoregon.edu, and search through it there. We'll have a link to that in the show notes. We will also have a link to Olympic Studies Week homepage on the show notes. May 12th at 9 a.m. Pacific time, the Olympic Studies Hub will host an Olympic Studies academic session that will be live streamed. And this is an introduction to the Studies Hub and what it offers. If you're in Eugene, Oregon on May 14th, there's going to be a tour of the Hayward Hall, the museum within Hayward Field. That's the legendary track and field venue at the university. The tour is also going to go to the top of Hayward Field Tower. On May 16th at 10 a.m. Pacific time, there's going to be an Olympic Studies industry session that will also be open to the public. And you can find more information about these sessions at the University of Oregon's Olympic Studies Week 2025 website. We will have a link in the show notes.
Hemos e bella.
The curling mixed doubles week world championships is over, which means some Olympic quota spots are filled for Milan Cortina 2026. The first 8 slots go to Italy, Canada, Estonia, who's in the games for the first time, Great Britain, Norway, Switzerland, Sweden, and USA. 2 spots are still up for grabs.
And my favorite, Amos Mosner and Stefania Constantini won the World Championships.
Which is excellent for them, and they already had a host slot for the quota, but that's a bonus going into an Olympic year. Looking good for you guys. We have some news on country houses from our friends at houseparty.blog. The Cortina cluster will include the Deutsches Haus at the Cortina Golf Club, and the Milano cluster will include Team Netherlands House at Super Studio Pew. House of Switzerland plans to have a site in both Milan and Cortina, but those are to be determined. Early bird ticket pricing ended this week for Milan Cortina, and there's a little controversy over what tickets were available. On Instagram, the Michaela Schifrin fan club, Federica Brignone fan club, and some other large ski enthusiast groups put out an open letter that said it's been almost impossible for fans to purchase individual tickets in category A or B, not hospitality, just individual. For alpine skiing, especially for women's events, men's events are also affected by this. Even skier Breezy Johnson chimed in saying that she struggled to get tickets for friends and family, and she's only seen them in hospitality portals, which are 4 times as expensive as a regular ticket. So fans are kind of upset at the lack of access they're getting. Apparently, they said this has been multiple games this has happened. I don't know if 2022 is in there, but it shouldn't be. But if 2018 and 2014 were issues for fans getting tickets, and these fans do travel around to World Cup events and they want to go to the Olympics to see their favorite skiers. So why is it so hard to get tickets? And they wonder why. We have some LA 2028 news, hospitality house news already, several years in advance.
I know. Talk about Go Silver Ferns.
Right. According to Rich Perlman of the Sports Examiner, the New Zealand National Olympic Committee has signed a memorandum of understanding. So it's not a done deal yet, but they've got the initial talks sealed. They want to put their house and fan zone in downtown Culver City. The house hopes to be at the Culver Hotel, with the fan zone adjacent to it at the Hill and the Town Plaza. Formal agreement still needs to happen, but this is the first step. They're coming in early.
They want to be prepared. Welcome to TKFLASTAN.
It is the time of the show where we check in with our team, Keep the Flame Alive. These are past guests and listeners of the show who make up our very own citizenship of our very own country, TKFLASTAN. Daniel Romanchuk placed 5th in the London Marathon just 6 days after racing in the Boston Marathon.
Alexander Massialis, Nick Itkin, and Lee Kiefer competed at the FIU Foil World Cup in Vancouver. Massialis won gold in the individual and teamed up with Nick Itkin, Garrick Meinhardt, and Bryce Louis to win team gold. Kiefer won silver in both the individual and team events.
Sprinter Kenny Bednarik won his second 100-meter race at the second Grand Slam track meet in Florida. He also won the 200 meters with a world-leading time of 19.84.
Bobby Fink won the 1,500-meter free and the 800-meter free and the 400-meter IM at the Tier Pro Swim Series in Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
Rugby coach Ben Ryan and his wife Michelle Ackerley announced that they will be welcoming a baby in October.
Rower Christy Wagner gave birth to a daughter, Benedetta May Accomando, on May 3rd. Mom and baby are home and doing well.
And former shot putter Michelle Carter has launched her own cosmetics line called Podium Cosmetics. Right now, it's a line of lip glosses, but there may be other products in the future. We will have a link to that in the show notes. And that is going to do it for this episode. Let us know what aspects of the Olympics or Paralympics you would want to study.
We do love hearing from you. You can chat with us and other listeners on our Facebook group, Keep the Flame Alive Podcast. Email us at flamealivepod@gmail.com. And the voicemail and text line is always open at 208-352-6348. That's 208-FLAME-IT. And if you need more Olympics and Paralympics in your life, and who doesn't, sign up for our newsletter at flamealivepod.com. We'll have a link to that in the show notes.
Next week, we are going back to Sydney 2000 to explore whether these games were really the best ever, even though we don't have commentary from Ben Waterworth in this episode. There's some surprises in football, and women's weightlifting and parapowerlifting are new, so how could anything go wrong? We'll find out next week. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, keep the flame alive.